So, good morning, afternoon, everyone. Yeah, this is All Core Devs 140. We have a bunch of things on the agenda today. First, going through obviously the merge that happened on Ropsten, talking through kind of any issues there and next steps. There were also a couple different little merge related items. So there was one issue we discussed on the Discord earlier this week about the responsiveness of EL clients when getting get payload requests from CL teams. Then there was something in the engine API to allow builders to set the gas limit, or to allow, validators to keep control over the gas limit. And then some talk about the next two testnets, Sepolia, Gordy. How do we go through those? Continuing the conversation on the difficulty bomb. There's been a specific EIP that's been proposed for that. And then there were two more EIPs on which we had updates, 4444s and 5027. So hopefully we get through all that. But I guess to start, does anyone want to walk through what happened on, and I believe it's pronounced Ropsten and not Ropsten in proper Swedish. But yeah, anyone want to walk through the fork there?
It's not, I synced with Perry before. He is not, I believe he's not on this call, so I can share his notes. With Ropsten, pre-merge, we were having, some of the consensus layer teams were having deposit tracking issues. Essentially, validators need to come to consensus on the state of the proof of work execution layer to import new deposits. This was due to some engineering assumptions about block times, which were not holding in Ropsten, and it has been patched by all teams. It's not something expected to be seen on mainnet. Then we moved towards TTD. Post TTD, we had about a 14% participation drop. 9% of this was from the Nimbus team nodes, which were configured improperly with the JWT secret. About 1.8% was from a Nethermind concurrency bug that required a reboot. And then about 2.5 to 3% was from Nimbus-Besu nodes that were attempting to use WebSockets, which surfaced a bug in the WebSockets implementation. They changed their configuration to use HTTP. So all of that came back online, and we see 99.5% participation right now. Now the concurrency bug, and they can tell us a bit more, is still being looked at. It occurs at the transition, and restart fixes it. The zero transaction blocks caused by timeouts have largely been fixed by Aragon, who they can expand a bit more. About 2 to 3% of blocks are being proposed with zero transactions, but we're still going. Perry has not yet isolated the combinations and is going to be looking into it. Looks like Nimbus-Besu might be one of the affected combos. And Marius transaction fuzzer has been started on the network to a very healthy transaction load. It seems to be reflected well. No more full blocks, more full blocks and fewer zero transaction ones. Let's see, zero transaction largely been handled. Obviously, we should dig in a bit more here if we can. So the shift is now into sync tests and DApp testing. ETH Staker's been running some sync tests, and Sam from the EF is also going to launch a number of sync tests on Ropsten as well. Ropsten, pardon me. And we'll have data on these next week. So like turning EL off, turning CL off, and more exotic scenarios. That is the TLDR from Perry.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a couple things I guess to dig in there. So the Nimbus was just a configure on the JWT. Nothing mind, you want to walk through kind of the issue, the issue that y'all had and what the status is there?
So we had one bug that occurred on transition, and it affected only a few nodes. It is connected with concurrency, how we are processing block. We found this bug in our code, but it hasn't been fixed yet, but we should resolve it soon. Yeah, that is all, I think.
if I can give more details, we have a problem when we got blocked from the network and from the CL client at the same time during the transition, and we wanted to process them both at the same time. When we cannot do that with our block processor, we should schedule them one by one, and that's really it.
And when you say processing, it's like you receive a new block from the network, and you're already processed, and you get like a block from the CL at the same time. So it's like a external and internal ping to the execution layer, basically.
Yes. That was the problem, and the problem was on Ropsten because there was a lot of blocks with the same height going on the same time, and that's why some small percentage of the node got it at the same time, and that's why they failed. And Restart fixed it. We'll just add the correct scheduling of this, and that's pretty much it. It's a fix that we will do next week.
Cool. And when you say, there were many blocks, I guess that's because on Ropsten, when we were mining, we were creating a bunch of uncles just because it was a bit of a sketchy situation to get all that hash rate at the same time. So is that right? Like just because, when you say all these blocks.
I think I asked about it, and there was mining, GetNode was mining on like 2 cores, and it didn't, I think it was overwhelmed, and it didn't process the block, and it made the second one with the same, or second, third one sometimes with the same block number before it managed to process the previous one. So that's why that was, I think, the case that I got from someone as an explanation. And that's actually, it's great that it happened because it showed our bug. So it's good.
Yeah, no, very, very cool. Thanks for sharing. And then the Nimbus-Besu WebSocket, does anyone want to just give a quick update there? I don't know if it's something from the Besu or the Nimbus side.
I can talk.
Yeah, that's on the Besu side.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Fabio, you want that? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so what we saw is that using WebSocket, Nimbus was not able to fetch the data that it needs. After checking with the Nimbus team, they send us an option to make things works. But then we had another problem, and we had to disable also JVT authentication. So now the setup that is working, at least for us, for our 2% of Besu validators that are configured with Nimbus, is to have WebSocket with a special flag and JVT authentication disabled on the Besu side.
Specifically, we have ETH subscribe and ETH unsubscribe are not getting added to the execution engine endpoint. It's just, I think it's an oversight on our part when we combined our JSON RPC and WebSocket onto the same port. We're not adding those 2 endpoints to that the engine endpoint. So I think it's going to be a quick fix, but like Fabio mentioned, we have to have a workaround for the moment for that combination.
Got it. And is the issue with the JWT kind of independent of that, or is it like?
Yeah, we only see that problem when we're using the force polling features. I suspect anyway that the force polling workaround in Nimbus is not sending a JOT token. We haven't investigated that, whether it's actually in the header or whether it's just expired or something to that effect. But for that particular workaround to work, we had to disable JOT authentication.
Got it. There's a question in the chat about EIP 3675, which is the merge EIP, and like disabling the block gossip. We discussed this on like one of the testing calls, I think last week, but it seems that if we did this, basically we couldn't do shadow forks, and I believe that yeah, there weren't any clients that disabled the gossip after the merge. I don't know if anyone who was on the testing call wants to give more context on this. Oh, Mikhail, I saw you come off mute. So
I was just going to say that disabling gossip should not like affect shadow forks. From what I understand, if there is another requirement in this EAP to disconnect peers that send you block gossip after transition gets finalized, and this what can break shadow
yes.
forks, because yeah.
Right. Does that answer your question, Proto? Okay, it was about the terminal blocks. Okay, yeah, perfect. Cool. Okay, so yeah, that was Besu, Nethermind. Yeah, Aragon, do you want to chat about the zero transaction blocks a bit?
Yeah, sure. So our mining has been experimental because we don't support GPU mining. So, but after the merge, we are going to support proof of stake mining. Still, the code is kind of, it's not as mature as we would like it to be. So we made some quick fixes, but we still need time to make the mining or proof of stake block building code more robust. Yeah, it's a process.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And then yeah, one last thing I guess on Ropsten. So now that we have Marius's transaction fuzzer running, it means basically every block should have transactions in it, correct? Because it was mentioned there's like 2-3% of blocks without transactions. I suspect that's something we would see on Ropsten like during normal operations. But yeah, so given that the transaction fuzzer is running, we probably don't want to see that, and the empty blocks we're seeing here are the results of an issue. Is that right?
I mean, it depends on how dynamic the gas is set on that transaction fuzzer, because you could imagine the base fee going up above what it is willing to pay, and then having some zero blocks. But I would at this point be monitoring if there are particular client pairs that consistently are having zero blocks,
yeah.
Zero transaction blocks. And Marius could comment on the dynamic nature of base fee and his transaction fuzzer.
I don't know if Marius is.
Yeah, that's
here. Yeah, there's the big geth room, but okay. Okay. Okay, Marius is not with us. Okay. Anything?
I have a question, Tim.
Yes.
About just I think we pulled more infrastructure providers through this transition than we had in previous testnets. Is there any update on how that went?
So I didn't hear from anyone that things were breaking. I didn't confirm. I didn't get confirmation that anything broke. So at first there was some people thought that some smart contracts had issues, but it turned out it was just a user spamming weird transactions to it, and that like coincided with the Ropsten merge. The other thing is it seemed for a while like the rate of failed transactions was higher, but I don't think that's quite the case. I'm talking with the Etherscan people to get some better data on that. The challenge with getting data around the Ropsten merge is because there were so many uncles and empty blocks around the merge, and the mining was like so weird. Even Etherscan had like a harder time like getting a nice data dump than they usually do. But it doesn't seem, at least like very high level, that like there's an increase in like the error rate of the smart contract transactions on the network, which is good. but yeah, I'll look into that some more. But yeah, aside from like this stuff, no one has at least complained loud enough that their product was broken. So that's really good.
Great.
Anything else anyone wanted to mention about the Ropsten transition? Okay, so there's two other merge-related, I guess, issues that we wanted to discuss. And I think it makes sense to go over those before we start talking about testnets and like more of like coordination, because it will obviously influence when and how we're ready. But the first was this idea of like the EL responsiveness to CL sending it get payload requests. I know earlier this week, I believe we talked about that in the Discord, where some CLs were sending like too many requests to ELs, and ELs are kind of working around it, but there still seems to see, or CLs, sorry, are sending requests for blocks too quickly for ELs to properly respond. And I know there were some fixes on the EL side to better accommodate that, but there was still sort of an issue on the CL side itself. I don't know if anyone has an update about that.
So just to clarify a little bit, I think the EL should, I think in general, this is like broadly speaking, if there's bugs in the consensus layer clients, the execution layer client should not be writing code that covers up those bugs. We should get them fixed in the consensus layer client. And so in this case, the bug is that when the consensus layer client sends a request for get payload, I think it's called get payload. Someone correct me if there's a more correct name there. The execution layer should send. Yeah. So if the execution layer receives a get payload request, it needs to send a block as soon as it can. It should not wait. It should not delay. If it has no block, it should send an empty block. It should not stop and go fetch things. Like it should have a block by now. If the CL is sending you that and you don't have enough time to actually prepare a block, then that is a CL bug, and you should not cover it up by then saying, oh, I'll take my time and actually do the thing that CL wants. You really need to be sending the block right away. On the CL side, if the CLs are sending you a prepare followed by a get that's like 10 milliseconds apart, that is a bug in the CL, or it does happen in the real world sometimes, but it's very rare and it shouldn't happen often. And again, you should send immediately whatever block you've got. If you don't have a block, send an empty block. Like send something as fast as possible. There should be no delay in this response.
Right. I generally agree with this. And just for some additional context, in 99.99% of scenarios, with lead times of seconds, you can send a prepare, and almost certainly when it's actually time to get, that prepare will be correct. You could potentially have some sort of reorg that might cause you to do a different prepare, which the other one should be aborted, and maybe there'd be insufficient time at that point to do the get with non-zero transactions. But I think we should be generally not masking that bug and providing, having CL provide the adequate time in 99.99% of these scenarios.
Lucas and Adrian both have their hand up. I don't know who was first. So whoever was first.
Okay, let me go first. So we implemented this workaround. This was partly because we wanted to check our block production better, and partly because this bug is very long-standing. I think we were trying to make people look at it for a few months now. So we wanted to have some code differently. We will revert that, but it also gives us some good information on Ropsten. We made it, I think, more or less same as Gav. So we are waiting potentially up to 500 milliseconds right now, which is in the time out of 1 second for the response. But I agree that it's something contrary to the spec, and we will drop it.
Thanks, Adrian.
So I think there's a couple of things here. It's worth being clear that this shouldn't be all, well, this definitely isn't all CL clients. I think it's only Nimbus now. So we should be pretty clear that most of the time this should be working. And if we're seeing those really short time periods with other CLs, then we've got more of a design problem. We're seeing late blocks coming up. I'm also not as sure it's entirely clear cut that we shouldn't add a delay, because CL, I mean, maybe we should add it on the CL side, that it tries to wait 500 mil if it knows it's got a bit more time and those kind of things. But right now, if we get a late block, we will, a block right at the end of one slot will give you no time at all, when actually we've got, a total of 4 seconds to play with. We could actually spare 500 milliseconds to create a block with transactions. But there's no way to communicate that kind of trade-off to EL currently. We're just trying to get the block right at the start of the slot every time.
It definitely feels like the CL should make that decision and just send.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, finish up, Micah, and then Andrew.
You can send the get later.
Yeah. So yeah, about Aragon's implementation. Right now, it's really simplistic and doesn't have any hacks. So when we receive a request to build a new payload, we start building it on the side. And when we receive a get payload, if that building process is finished, then we return the build block. Otherwise, we return a pre-populated empty block. But that's probably too simplistic. And what I'm currently thinking about doing is that when we receive get payload and we still haven't finished building the block, what I want to do is to stop adding more transactions into the block. But then we'll need some time to actually finish sealing the block, calculating the state root, and like finalizing the block. So to my mind, this get payload, there won't be any artificial waiting period, but it won't be like super instantaneous. It won't be a microsecond. It will be, I don't know, maybe tens of milliseconds in some cases to finalize the block. That's my current thinking.
My gut, just personally, is that if you've got a block and you're kind of iterating through the transactions and you get the get payload, and you just need to cut off iterating transactions and you just start your sealing process and then you send. To me, that feels like it fits the bill of as soon as possible. I don't know how other feel, but I don't personally have a problem with the strategy you just described.
Yeah, I would agree. Anyone else? Anyone have an objection to that?
I mean, on the CL side, we've got to build a block anyway, so there is always going to be a bit of time, and we're probably hopefully calling get payload right at the start of our block build process. So it's happening in parallel to a degree. It's not hundreds of milliseconds to create a block, but it's not free either on our side. So that kind of balances out pretty well.
Yeah, I think the main thing here is you shouldn't be like going and requesting a block from a remote server or a builder, or you shouldn't be like starting to collect your transactions and execute them when you get the get payload. If you haven't executed transactions by now, it's too late. Whereas if you just need to do like a little bit of cleanup or finalization or whatever it is, internal stuff, I think that's okay. To Adrian's point, you do bring up a good point, Adrian. I think that the EL knows about how long it needs to build a block, and that information may differ between execution layer clients, right? So Nethermind may build a block faster or slower than Geth, which may build faster or slower than Aragon. And so how much time you need to give them in those situations where you've got a prepared that's going to be followed very closely by a get. I appreciate the point you're making where it's not obvious. Like you want to get as soon as possible, and you don't know how long the EL needs between a get and a prepare to reasonably prepare a block. Does anyone have any ideas on how we can resolve that?
So to my mind, I think the current process is fine, and the vast majority of the time it should work out. where the EL has many seconds to work. So I don't think we need to do anything quickly, and can kind of see how it plays out, even go through the merge on mainnet. I'd be fine with current design. But if we were to optimize it, my suggestion would be that the CL can simply provide a kind of maximum time frame to the EL when it sends a get payload request. So it can say, you know, I'm running behind, I need it just now, I'll give you 0, or you can have half a second. It may be as simple as, you know, saying you can take a small amount of time or not, and maybe don't specify milliseconds, or we do specify milliseconds, and CLs can kind of try and be smart. But I think it is something like that. If the CL can just signal to the EL, I'm right at the start of the slot, I'm on track, I have some milliseconds to spare, or I don't, I'm already, you know, on the cusp of my block being late.
Yeah, I wish we had versioning in the engine API, so it didn't hurt me so much to punt this until after the merge.
We do.
Yeah, and we'll need to make changes to the engine API after the merge. So this is not the only time. We'll have to think through this. Just because, just because we're already like a third of the call through, it seems like we're roughly in agreement here. Like Nimbus seems to be the main CL which has an issue that we're needing to address about this, and Danny just posted in the chat that they are working on it and prioritizing it. But beyond that, basically, assuming Nimbus fixes it, we can probably just leave things as is. And
the reason I want to bring this up on all core devs instead of the CL call is because we do need Geth to fix their cover up. So Geth currently delays 500 milliseconds, so they can build a long block, and they need to stop doing that. Like Nethermind copied that behavior, and that's bad behavior that we need to get fixed.
Right. Anyone from the Geth team want to chime in? We can see that there's like 5 of you on camera, so
there's like 10 of them, and not a single one has a mic. You know what? I bet the one person with the mic is the one person that has like a broken mic.
They might have like a 10-second delay because they're on the moon.
Yeah.
Moon basement.
Yes. Geth. Oh, I see someone is
Geth gets this
fixed.
With another frog thing, you would be the one to talk on this.
Okay, we can follow up with Marius after.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll follow. Okay, we'll follow up about this offline. Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, moving on from this. So yeah, just to summarize, it seems like most CLs already have it fixed. Nimbus needs to fix it. Nethermind and Geth have workarounds that they need to basically revert. Nethermind will do that, and we need to talk with Geth offline. The next thing we had was this was by Alex Stokes. I don't know if he's on the call. And Mikhail, you had some input onto this. Oh yes, Alex is here.
I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, Alex, you want to give us some background on on the builder spec?
Yeah. So essentially, Tim dropped this issue in the chat, and basically it suggests that we add the gas limit as a parameter to the payload attributes. So right now it is not. And the reason we want it to be is because it gives proposers more flexibility over setting the gas limit during the build process. And I think this probably looks like adding a V2 message. I doubt we want to change the V1 right now. But if we do this and EL clients support it, then it means that you can use off-the-shelf software for external builders much more easily. Danny?
Okay, I think your last point was at least the rebuttal to what I'm about to say, which I think Micah said in the chat, in that validators presumably control their execution layer and so can set their config there. And
well, right. So they do for the local client, but this is if you're using the builder network, then you might not be able to know. Like a builder wouldn't necessarily know for this proposer.
Sure. The builder has to like dynamically adjust some config or CLI.
Right.
Yeah, sure. Got it.
What is the scenario where I thought even with the builder network, you still had an execution client that was under your control, and you received a block from the builder network, which you then validated and executed with your execution client. Is that not correct?
Right, but so this is just a way to signal. So let's say I'm using like stock Geth to help build. There's no way to tell Geth right now, like, hey, for this next slot, you should use this limit versus that one.
This is
the idea
for the validator.
We want to.
This is for the builder who's servicing many validators who might have different configuration values.
Is the idea
They definitely will, right?
Configuration, we want to make it so users only have to configure one of their two clients, like so they don't have to configure Geth at all. They can just double click it, so to speak. Or am I missing something?
This is not a UX thing. This is to help facilitate a builder who's a separate entity in the network who services probably many different validators who have potentially many different gas limits. And so they would be able to reuse this engine API to service others more easily if they could dynamically specify that gas limit. Otherwise, they're gonna have to modify the Geth software. Again, this is for builders. The idea of a validator setting this in their Geth node is totally fine for their EL node.
So perhaps I'm missing something. I apologize if I am. I thought the design is a given validator would have a execution client and a consensus client that's under their control.
Yes.
The consensus client would send some stuff to the execution client saying, hey, prepare a block for me. The execution client would then send that details about that off to the builder network to say, hey, I need a block from somebody. And then those people would then send back. I didn't think the builders were talking directly to some validator's consensus client. Am I missing?
The builders talk to relays who talk to consensus clients. Consensus clients can either get a block locally or from this network. When getting it from the network, there are a couple of parameters that might be specific to a certain validator, gas limit that they want being one. And so for the job of these external builders to be able to reuse software more to be able to reuse EL software and this API to service many validators, they want to be able to put some of these parameters, gas limit being that one parameter right now.
Gotcha. Okay, so I think the piece that I was missing, just to make sure that is that the builder network talks to the consensus layer, does not talk to the execution layer. And then when the consensus layer gets a block from the builder network, it then asks its own execution layer client, hey, can you verify this is good for me? Yeah. But this whole process happens between consensus client and builder network. The execution client's not involved in that communication protocol at all.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. The validator can get a block locally or maybe externally, and then it always asks locally to import and make sure things are good. But when it's asking externally, you might need to set certain parameters.
And maybe
so in that case, I'm on board.
Well, I guess, yeah, the trade-off is like we are changing the semantics of the engine API really late. That's correct, I guess?
Well, I think this is why we make a V2 rather than a V1.
Okay.
Like we don't change, like we could, if everyone is on board, we could change the V1, but I think it's a bit too late for that.
Yeah. But I guess, yeah, and the question I would have is there like a security thing here where like builders have control over the gas limit?
Well, we want to make it so that they don't, right?
Right, but currently using the payload V1, so say the gas limit is 30 million. If we're using the current API and the builder sends me a block that like raises it as much as possible, but the validator...
No, so yeah, I mean, builder software could still respect, the validator's preferences. It's just having this makes it easier to reuse a bunch of software.
Okay.
So it lowers the barrier to entry.
So for now, builders will have to modify the software. If we add a V2, the builders could go back to using much less modified software.
Got it. And
is this really the only thing that's stopping us from having software that works for external builder ELs? Or are there other rough edges of the engine API for them?
I think you're asking if there's other rough edges to the engine API for this use case. I haven't found any. One other parameter that might be worth thinking about is the extra data in the EL block. It would kind of be the same deal with the gas limit, but I think that one's less critical.
Right.
And
Okay.
I think
Sorry.
No, you're good. Sorry.
These are strictly improvements for the relationship between the EL and an external builder. This is not needed for the relationship between the local EL and local CL.
Right. Well, I mean, assuming that you can set your local EL to have the gas limit all of your validators want, but that's probably fine.
Okay.
Ansgar, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly ask if we all agree in the first place that it is desirable for validators using an external builder network to basically have the gas limit set by the validator, because I mean the gas limit is this somewhat weird parameter where I think we kind of agree that it's theoretically under consensus control. We just for now put it under miner/validator control to be able to react quicker, not just with hard forks. So just if really the only reason is to react quick in case something goes wrong, it might actually be desirable to have fewer parties manually have to adjust the parameter. And in case anyone misbehaves and increases the gas limit too much, that is already in a sense a network attack that we would have to manually intervene for. So I'm just wondering, like, probably the answer is we want validators to control this, but I'm not sure this is like an obvious thing.
I think the danger of having just a few builders have control over it is greater than any risk we would incur by needing to suddenly change it and not being able to.
I agree. We also did talk about this a few weeks ago and generally agreed that although validators aren't necessary,
I think importantly, we can punish.
Oh, sorry, Danny, finish and then Mika.
Although validators and miners' interests aren't always necessarily totally aligned with users' interests, the shorter term profit interests of builders are likely less aligned than validators and miners would be, and thus we decided that it makes sense for validators akin to miners to retain control over this. There's probably notes and stuff from the previous call we talked about that. Yeah, it's also more attributable in the sense that we can react in all sorts of social ways if there's an attack here.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
So, okay, just to summarize, so I don't think anyone is advocating to have this part, like to have this override the current V1 endpoints. If that's the case, this is your chance. Okay. If not, does anyone disagree with making that like a V2? Or I guess maybe another way to frame this is like, Alex, for this to be useful, I suspect this V2 endpoint would need to go live before the mainnet merge, right?
So here's the thing. I mean, like builders will still exist and they will do the job as the spec dictates. It's just this would make it a lot easier for like other builders to come online. So, we definitely shouldn't block the merge for this. It's not like critical or urgent in that sense, but the sooner the better.
And is this something all clients need to add support for at the same time? I guess obviously, like if you add it first, more builders might use you, but like, is there I don't think there's this hard requirement that it gets activated at the same time. Is that correct?
I mean, like theoretically, no, but I think there's network effects if everyone does it, because then we can kind of just be like, okay, this is what we use now.
Yeah. Okay. Mikhail, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just would like to add that if we have a V2 AP loads attributes V2 with this field, I think that we should make it optional for those cases where home stakers or other stakers that just don't want to mess with the configuration and probably just don't understand the gas limit implications, like the change in gas limit and the implications of changing gas limit on the network. They will just not do this and use like default values that we have currently in EL clients, in the binary distributions of EL clients. So that's just like to add on this topic. So like if the value of this field is not provided or it's 0 or whatever the default will be, then EL just set its own limit that it has in the binary distribution.
Okay. I guess it seems like there's like some agreement to do this. There's some details to figure out. Is it fine to just continue this conversation async over the next couple of weeks? Like I feel like we're not.
Yeah, I can start some PRs and then we can go that way.
Awesome. And yeah, I linked the issue earlier. Let me just link it again here for folks to look into. But yeah, not changing the V1, and yeah, we'll see what comes for a V2. Okay, so the next, like, I think actually, yeah, there's one more like pretty independent topic, and then it all gets pretty intertwined. I think that the next thing I just wanted to chat about is like the Sepolia beacon chain. I know we'd mentioned like we wanted to launch it as soon as possible. I think there's been some progress around like selecting the validator set, and fortunately, I know Perry is not here, but does anyone have an update on like the launch of the Sepolia beacon chain?
Yeah, the current config is slated for the launch to happen on the 20th, and for it to go through a couple of through Altair and then Bellatrix over the next like 24 hours. I believe that Perry is also generally locked down who's going to be participating in this. It will be a gated contract, so kind of akin to Clique. And we'll be using like kind of an ERC20 version of the deposit contract. So we can add validators, but people can't just get Sepolia ETH and create their own validators. Additionally, they're looking into when you create the beacon chain out of thin air for this type of testnet, you can actually inflate the supply. So there's a bit of talk about inflating the supply on a few validators so that there's a lot of supply just in the background in case there ends up Sepolia ETH hoarding. So that's the last kind of thing that they're sorting through over the next few days before the configs are probably finalized around Monday. Please take a look. There is a link with the configs in terms of the distribution of validator set and the timing if you want to take a look and give your thumbs up on that.
Cool. And just one thing, so you mentioned it's going to run through Bellatrix basically soon after launch. So I assume this means that even though it's like a restricted validator set, we're just going to do a TTD override on Sepolia when we're ready to actually merge it?
Correct. The TTD in the original config is set to a very high number, similar to what happened on Ropsten.
Yeah.
But we are planning the Bellatrix to just happen because we're not inviting lots of the community members to test on this or anything. Yeah. So.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I guess any comments on just the launch of the beacon chain there? If not, yeah, so it seems like there's a couple interrelated things. So first is like, now that we've seen Ropsten fork, what do we want to see and like what state do we want to be in before we move to other testnets? Second is what the ordering of testnets should be. So there we mentioned earlier that we wanted to potentially do Gordy and then Sepolia. And then this week there's been more chat about maybe flipping them so that we actually go through Sepolia first. And then the kind of third related topic is like the difficulty bomb and all that. And obviously, if we want to delay the difficulty bomb, that might change kind of not only the ordering, but obviously the timing around which we do all of this. And I think it probably makes sense to just start to like hear from client teams, especially on the EL sides, but also CL teams, if given that some of them are here, like what are you kind of looking for to be ready to move to the next test nets? Like, what would you like to see, in your software, in testing suites and whatnot? So if any the like EL client teams has thoughts about that. Marek, I think you were first. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, a Hive test should be passing in all clients. Maybe Kurt does is green. Block proposals, of course. And we are missing, I think, terminal block hash override. We discuss it. I think we are implementing it right now, but not sure if all ELs implemented it.
Yeah, on that last point, I think we decided that not all ELs would implement it because like Geth already had equivalent functionality that people could use. So I think we had decided against like making it a must-have for all the clients. Yeah.
And there needs to be a credible path to implement on ELs, but we do not expect to necessarily have to use it.
Yeah.
So it has been deprioritized if people don't have the time.
Yeah. But then any client who already has the ability to set a specific head in the chain, it's quite similar to the TBH override. But yeah, okay. So, but beyond the TBH, the Hive test and kurtosis passing, this block proposal issue, and then Thomas also added in the chat fixing this concurrency bug, which we talked about it earlier. That all makes sense. Lucas.
Yeah. So optimally, I would like to have a code that we considered finished all the required things for the merge, which current ETA we have currently very high velocity on that is around 4 to 5 weeks, but we can go earlier if that would be the consensus for the other devs. But we would like to have at least one testnet after we finalize the code.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Andrew.
Yeah, I also like for Aragon, we still have to fix a lot of Hive tests. It's like we are failing 88 out of 110. Probably there are kind of only a limited number of underlying issues, but still it's a lot of work to fix all the Hive tests and also to improve the robustness of our block building code and just more testing, more code stabilization, and we also we are still discussing how to tackle this issue when the latest block in the RPC request should wait for fork choice update head block confirmation, but it means that when before that you have a new block added to the state, but you are supposed to point to the block, to the prior block, and in Aragon we only have a single state. How we handle that, it's not fully decided yet. So quite a lot of things, but I'm not sure we'll be able to resolve all of them 100%. But on our side, it's we are not. I wouldn't say that we are kind of a couple of weeks away from being super ready. We need more time, preferably.
Got it. Thanks. Anyone from Besu or Geth?
I could say from the Besu perspective, I want to echo what others have said about like across the board execution clients passing all of the engine Hive tests specifically. I think some more testing and expectations around post-merge sync probably need to be ironed out. I think that there's just a little bit of maybe scenarios and expectations that we should set, like specifically for fast sync or snap sync post-merge. Basically requires a consensus layer, and I'm not sure that that's an expectation across the board. So just kind of buttoning up what we think post-merge sync should look like.
So when you say Besu requires a consensus layer, do you mean like to basically run on the network? Is that right?
Well, in order to choose a pivot block, we don't, if we're post-merge, we won't choose a pivot block unless we get direction from a consensus client. And I think that there's some, like on some of the solo stakers have had questions about why Besu is not syncing when they don't have a consensus client on networks that have already merged.
That's for any client combination. That's entirely why the whole optimistic thing exists on the consensus layer, so that good heads, reasonably good heads, can continue to be given to the execution layer. So it's requisite. Okay, I saw some of the wargaming that was talked about around sync and post-merge sync, and one of the scenarios was execution layer sync without a consensus layer client. So
but you can't know the head of the chain.
Yeah, completely agree. We can't choose a good pivot.
Yeah, I don't know that would be or should be possible, basically.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I mean, there might be test cases where the execution layer is synced and the consensus layer is not, and then the consensus layer comes online and syncs. But I don't know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, the execution API spec that I've seen leaves sync kind of as a topic to be implemented by whatever method. It seems like, at least the specs that I've seen, it'd be nice to see this like a spec for post-merge sync, just baseline expectation.
I guess more from the EL perspective, right? Because
yes, yeah,
it's more from the CL's perspective.
Exactly, yeah. And there's generally more lead time for an execution sync than there is an optimistic sync on the consensus side.
Okay.
So Nevermind also is able to sync to the terminal block, but it doesn't sync any further without the consensus layer, and it doesn't sync the state, so it only syncs blocks and headers to that point. Actually, maybe not. Actually, I'm right, because we have something called another pivot that we bake into our configs, which is a block we trust, a block from like few weeks ago, a week ago from the current head that we trust, and we can sync to that. So we bake it, we up it on every release. So that's how Nevermind works. I'm not entirely sure if Geth doesn't have some hacky way of syncing further, but I might be wrong here. Totally not saying they have.
Geth does. I mean, I think they generally retain their sync methods because the consensus layer just gives them heads, and they do snap sync from there.
So if they don't have consensus layer, what happens?
They do not. They're not able to sync, which I think is fundamental here.
So essentially what happens in Geth is that currently we just try to sync to somebody. So once the merge happens, everybody reports the same total difficulty, so we cannot really pick someone good enough. Currently what happens is that we just synchronize to some random person reporting the highest total difficulty, but that obviously isn't really good. We will only do this during the transition, and what we will do is we will add one more flag to the chain config, which kind of states that yes, this chain has already successfully merged. We would wait for the merge to happen and then flip it a week afterwards in the next release. And after that, Get will simply stop doing legacy sync at all. So if that flag is set, then when you start up Get, it will just say that I don't have a beacon client. The network, the chain config says that this is a merged network. So until you attach a beacon client, I will just sit idle and not do anything. And once the beacon client tells us what the head is, then we can just snap sync like before.
Having a beacon node here is akin to being able to follow the header chain and get what is the highest difficulty from what you can see from there and being able to sync from there. If you don't have the beacon node client, then you can't follow any of those like strategies.
Was the actual confusion that people expected to not have a consensus layer client, or expected that the EL would be starting and making progress on sync while the CL was syncing? So I've seen the latter in conversations, and that's just because we don't have a way to checkpoint sync on Ropsten because there isn't a place to get the state currently. So that kind of solves itself on mainnet when it's much more common to checkpoint sync and your CL is in sync straight away.
So one thing that that's maybe worth noting is that the consensus client, the beacon client, doesn't need to be fully in sync. So if the consensus client tells me that the latest block is something that may be 1 month old, that's already enough for Get to start syncing because we already have one potential target, and while the beacon client is just progressing with sync and finding new and new headers, we will just keep switching the sync targets. But the only thing we need is one starting point so that we can actually start sync. And I mean, syncing mainnet will take 6 hours, so the consensus client has 6 hours to figure out what the latest head is in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, syncing from Genesis, you'll take at least 6 hours on mainnet for the blockchain before you even get to the merge block, before you get any heads from us at all. But that's not normal, right? The right way to sync the consensus layer is with checkpoint sync. We're just in this difficult place at the moment with particularly Ropsten, which is a shorter chain, but you can't get a state from Infura. We're missing sources to go and get that checkpoint state. So we're always syncing from Genesis, and it's taking the consensus layer some time to even get to the merge block, which I'm not sure how long that is on Ropsten, but then to get fully in sync as well, it's just taking, it may only be an hour or two, and you'll start getting data from us, and we'll be tracking the head. But I think that's causing confusion for users because they're seeing the two clients start up and the CL is syncing and the EL is just sitting there doing nothing because it doesn't know anything about the post-merge chain yet.
So one thing that, for example, in Get, we did see, and it is bothering us, is that right even before the merge, before the transition happens, you have the beacon client connected to the execution client, but both sides are kind of just silent, so you don't really know what's happening. And I think if we could just make it a tiny bit verbose in that the user has a clue that, okay, now the execution layer client, although it is waiting, the consensus client maybe from time to time gives a sign of life that it is actually doing something, it's actually progressing. I think that would be enough. It would be nice to have some form of minimal feedback that something is happening.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to add just some something from the sync process that's going to regularly inform the user that is waiting on a consensus layer direction. I think that would solve a lot of the confusion.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly pin the blame on the EL when we're stuck syncing, waiting for optimistic sync. Like if we're tracking head at optimistic sync, we explicitly change things to say we're waiting on the EL now because it was causing confusion on our side. So it might be that you kind of need the opposite on the EL side, but you need to say waiting for chain head from CL.
So the Get at least has a similar mechanism that if we are actually waiting for the beacon client, then as far as I know, periodically we will print out the message that yes, we are still waiting for the beacon client to tell us something, so that the user doesn't think that the client just died. The question is whether it would make sense to expose just a tiny bit of more information so that we can say that
yes, we are waiting for the beacon client, and the beacon client is at, I don't know, this block out of that block or something. So that might be worth considering to add, but it's not necessary in my opinion.
Okay, and I guess what's the right place where like we should be discussing that basically, like yeah, I just want to make sure. I guess we can use the merge channel, but you know, sync specifically for ELs. I guess we have the execution dev channel, so I think it's probably worth just continuing that conversation there. I
mean, there's not.
Oh, interop, yeah, is good. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I don't think there's too much to discuss here. I guess the question is if somebody, we can check out what it looks like, what, for example, the logs look like when you try to synchronize Ropsten currently with the current setup.
Yeah.
And we can just figure out that, okay, it would be nice to have this or that extra information, and then we can just figure out how to add it or if to add it. I don't know if it makes sense to standardize too much how to sync.
Yeah, I don't know, Besu, I know you kind of mentioned that it would be nice to have a bit more respect, but are you happy with this?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. Is the setting that baseline expectation? I think we're all on the same page about post-merge sync. It sounds like, at least with the implementations. I just, yeah, having that, setting that expectation for the community is probably helpful, and logging weights might be sufficient for that.
Got it. Okay, and Justin, I saw you had your hand up, but put it back down. Did you have a comment on the sync?
Yeah, I guess my main comment was that shouldn't we be having different expectations based on which testnet we want to target? So maybe the last testnet that we do, if it's Gurley, for example, we want to have very high expectations, maybe passing all the Hive tests, but maybe we could have, you know, lowered expectations for the next testnet, which could be Sepolia. And I tend to agree with Danny that just commented Sepolia first. You know, maybe we can have kind of this, like, keep the ball rolling and try and do that first with lower expectations.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I think, yeah, that kind of moves us to the next bit, but I just want to make sure on the sync. So I guess, yeah, one thing I want to make sure. So the sync issue, it seems like there was nothing else there. And then, like, just taking a bit of a step back, you know, Nethermind, Aragon basically chimed in about like where they'd like to be at, but I don't know, Geth, did you have anything else you wanted to add on that front? Like, so obviously, you know, Hive tests passing, and we can debate after like how much for what testnets, bugs fixed, and like at least one testnet where we consider the code finished. Anything else on the Geth side?
No. So regarding the Hive test, I've been working on that. Progress was a bit slow this week. We should be possible that next week to have the Hive, like the missing Hive tests fixed, or the Hive tests that are like where the test is wrong fixed, and so that it can be passed by all the clients.
Got it. Thanks. Lucas?
So I'm not entirely convinced that the tests are broken. Actually, I think that the test might test a decent scenario. It might not be easily possible on every client because it might be hard to implement, but I will get up to you with that in a few days because I need to prove it that we can pass it, and I'm not entirely sure. Maybe your Marius is right. I need to do more investigation.
It's possible to pass it, but it's just way different than the spec that we have. So we need to implement something completely new, completely different than what we have already, just to pass this one test. That is not a real scenario.
So the test is that network has correct blocks and our CL send us incorrect block. Basically it.
Yes, but our CL sent us an incorrect block in the past that we had to store, and so like it introduces a new caching mechanism that we have to cache all the new payloads, which is nowhere in the spec before that.
Guys, sorry for interrupting you, but I would take the discussion to the testing call. Fortunately, it's happened pretty soon.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's agree.
Okay. Yeah. But okay. So, anything else on the get side, like with regards to just general merge readiness? I don't think there was.
So the only thing, one thing missing in get right now is the safe block hash, as like in the JSON RPC stuff. That one is missing. We have the finalized in JSON RPC, but the other one is not there. But other than that, we should be pretty good. I think there might be one or two Hive tests that we are still failing that I'm not sure about.
Got it. And for JSON RPC, it seems like having finalized is obviously like a must-have, or at least a very, very nice to have. How about, yeah, are all teams kind of on the same, do all teams have at least like finalized implemented, I guess?
We have.
Okay. Does anyone not have finalized?
We have safe and finalized.
You have what, sorry?
Safe and finalized.
Okay, nice.
We haven't implemented it yet, but we'll implement it soon. It's not a big deal.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Besu has safe and finalized in PR form right now. Still, it's not yet merged.
Okay.
It's merged just some hours before, yes.
Nice.
And it's also passing the Hive tests regarding that code.
And okay, and there's a couple CL teams here as well. So I don't know, beyond everything we discussed, is there anything on like the CL side that you all are like looking for or want to see before moving to at least one more testnet? Oh, Terrence, yeah.
I think we are pretty much ready to go. We do have a few UX related issues that we want to deal with, but they're not blocked there. On top of that, we are spending a lot of time working on MEV boost. So that's not a block as well, but that's a nice to have that ready-ish, but that can always roll in later. So yeah.
Got it.
No blockers for Teku, I think. We're in testing with our MEV boost stuff, so yeah, that's not a blocker either.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the Lighthouse is on the same page where it's mostly UX and MEV boost testing.
Got it. Okay. So clearly there's like, you know, oh, sorry, was there another CL team? Oh.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Mateusz from Flashbots. And there are actually some reservations from validators around MEV boost. So the wait and solo validators need some more guidance on how to run this, and they also should be ready before the merge.
Sorry, I missed the like first part of your sentence. Can you repeat that? Actually, can you just repeat the like last sentence before they need to be ready for the merge?
Sure. So we have some reservations from validator pools, in particular Lido, around monitoring of the extraction of MEV, and from the solo validators in that they still don't know how to run MEV boost, and they also have to be ready for the merge.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Yeah, so we oh, Danny, sorry, did you have your hand up as well?
Oh, I was just going to say, MEV Boost should continue to be developed in parallel. I would even argue that it's potentially a good thing if it's rolled out right after the merge rather than right before. Although just to reduce the potential attack surface and error and issues there. So I wouldn't necessarily put it as a blocker. I think that it should come out very soon after, if not during them.
Okay. Okay. And then there's a comment. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, a note on this is that MEV can be really dangerous to what happens on the chain, and MEV Boost actually can mitigate some of the attacks that can happen. So I would actually consider looking at the research and trying to answer this question: should we be releasing MEV Boost before the merge, or should we wait? Because it's not a clear cut that it's not so clear cut that MEV Boost is an attack vector. And I would argue that it actually tries to mitigate some of the attacks.
Attack vector from protocol construction. I just mean as an additional piece of software and a very complicated upgrade.
Okay. Yeah, just to not dive down the MEV rabbit hole for the rest of the call. Yeah. So I guess I'm generally curious to hear from like just EL client teams, given like all of this. I feel like there's like a few paths forward. One is we move to Sepolia as the next testnet and use that as like kind of a better run than Gordy. Probably not with like the software that will end up on mainnet, and we keep Gordy as the final testnet for that to happen. Or the other way around is like, you know, we wait till we have something really stable and then ship that on Gordy first because there's more users, and then Sepolia is just kind of a quick sanity check at the end that can happen quickly after. So I guess generally the people prefer to have the next testnet happen sooner to get us another round when we have some confidence that we've addressed these issues, but we're maybe not quite at mainnet code, or the people prefer to wait longer and then maybe just have Sepolia happen like really quickly near the merge, but Gordy kind of being the test, like waiting to basically deploy another testnet until we're much closer to production readiness code. I see a hand in like Bordell and one from Danny. I don't know if those are like new hands or.
Bordell's been up for a long time. Mine's a new hand. We did discuss this 1 week ago on the consensus layer call, and everyone on the consensus layer call wanted.
So 2 things. I'll answer.
Sorry.
So I'll answer 2 questions. This question was. My personal preference is that if we start forking testnets, then it would be nice to just, if we're on the roll, then it would be nice to have it finish with mainnet forking, because if we fork 3 testnets and then decide that, okay.
Oh, we lost you, Peter.
Okay, let's tweak it a little and wait for it, then it's kind of irrelevant. So that's
Sorry, we missed like part of what you were saying. So when you said like if we start forking the testnets, we should, and then you start freezing out.
Okay, so when we start forking the testnets, it would be nice to finish with actually forking mainnet too. Otherwise, if we just fork all the testnets and we never reach mainnet and we just have a 2-month gap in between, then by the time we reach mainnet,
Okay, you're breaking up again, but I think with.
If we start forking, then we should just finish with mainnet. So.
Okay. So you broke up a bit, and I think like beyond the momentum bit, there's also the idea that like if we fork testnets and then wait 2 months to do mainnet, there's a bunch of other PRs that get in the clients, and that's like would go directly to mainnet. Danny, I think you're.
Yeah, I was just gonna say on the consensus layer call, consensus layer teams wanted to do Sepolia first, so that we can kind of keep moving in a moderate stakes environment, and then ramp up and make the decision on Goerli from there.
EL team have an opinion here?
Was the
Go on, Gary.
I was gonna say, was the June 20th genesis for the Sepolia beacon chain, was that in line with the somewhat accelerated or the Sepolia first timeline, or would that change?
That works for Sepolia first, assuming that in 2 weeks we were picking we had kind of circulated a TTD and we're picking it on all of our devs or something like that.
Well, we could do, it's like the minimum duration, right? We could have Bellatrix and then pick TTD 2 weeks after that, right? Like, and it would still work.
Right. I just mean it lines up with like
Yes.
picking TTD in soonish and getting it done. I don't think we're gonna do Sepolia in a week. So Sepolia beacon chain in 10 days and doing Sepolia shortly after works with the timeline.
Okay, that makes sense. And then Lucas?
So I would like to have a bit of time to progress with all the things we mentioned.
Yeah.
So it all depends on the details of the timeline, really. So maybe let's discuss propositions on that.
Okay, and I guess, TJ Rush, I was gonna mention the bomb, but yeah, you wanna give a quick update there?
If you don't mind, I'll share my screen and go through a 2 minute. It'll kind of set the stage for what I think we can do. Are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so just to get you where we're at like 14.7 second blocks here. And if you look over here, you can see it's going to probably be down around 18 to 20 second blocks, I think, by the middle of July, maybe the end of July. I'm conservative, so I'm going to say the middle of July, you're going to be at 17 or 18 second blocks. This is another view of the same data, just so we get 14.7 as the current time. There's a couple of scripts out there that are actually inaccurate. They're underestimating the effect of the bomb. So this is accurate data as of this moment. So I think there's basically 3 things we could do. We could delay, remove, or just do nothing. Each of these has different good and bad points. Delaying it gives you time. Obviously, it's hard to delay to an accurate place. And it looks bad to the community, but there's nothing you can do about that. Removing it also looks bad. It's actually good, I think, because you could make an argument that we no longer need it because this merge is going to happen, and it's kind of a sign of confidence in the fact that it's going to happen. But it might also be interpreted really badly by the community. The third thing is to do nothing. And that obviously has the very bad outcome that you have 20 or 30 second blocks by August. But I think it's actually maybe a good thing because the community, I think of it as hitting the community on top of the head with a stick and saying, hey, the core devs are a great group of people, but the community has to pay attention to the fact that the core devs has the power to make this decision. And we can use that to say, you community have to become more involved in these kinds of decisions. It can also be interpreted as a threat. So that's a really bad outcome as well. So what I would do, and nobody asked me, but this is what I would do. I would simply remove it. The next thing I would do after that is do nothing at all. And the last thing I would do is delay it. Now, I know that's probably not how it's going to happen. It's probably going to be delayed. If you delay it, what I would do is I would absolutely make a decision now. I would delay it for a longer time than you think you need. I would make a very loud, very public announcement of a date when you're committing to make the merge. That gives you, like, if you do miss the date, if you do miss it in 3 months, you have some flexibility.
So
and the same exact thing happens if you remove it. You can make a very loud announcement, but I think you need to make an announcement now, and I wouldn't try to delay it to a precise place.
Okay. Well, I guess first, thanks for sharing. I do have a couple high level thoughts. First is I don't think we should, I don't think we should make a merge date announcement by far. Like, I think that will just backfire. There's no way we get it. Yeah, so I don't think announcing the merge date is like in any way like possible option. I think, yeah, it might make sense to just like here, I know Thomas had put together an EIP based on the discussions on the previous call. So like, it might make sense for Thomas to take like a couple minutes to walk us through that as well. And like the reasoning there. And that was like for a delay. And then I see there's already a bunch of people with their hands up. So
let me make one quick point. By making a delay, you're definitely creating a date of a merge date, because that's what the entire world will think that is.
Sure. I'm not as concerned with like the perception of it. Like if we delay the bomb 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, whatever, and whatever the commitment we make, like I don't care if there's some articles that say that the merge is delayed to the end of the year. I do think that like us announcing a merge date is really bad, because it's actually us announcing a merge date. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Thomas?
Hi, yeah, so EIP 5133 was proposed, and the calculation is based on the discussion from our last session. It proposes 500,000 blocks delay, which peaks the mid-August, more or less mid-August for the bomb to activate. So as we know, the bomb already activated, and I think it looks worse than some people thought it was. That's based on the what TJ mentioned a moment ago. The values calculated based on the scripts that we have show around 0.1 seconds delay by mid-August with these numbers, around 0.6 seconds, so around 14 seconds blocks again in November, and then very steep decrease as we see it now. So it actually is all based on, we want to have the stable network behaving as expected, that degrades when we think more or less the merge should happen. And mid-August was that target for now. So please have a look at EIP 5133. I agree also that we shouldn't really announce the date of the merge until we know exactly what the terminal total difficulties, because people will make a lot of decisions and preparations based on that date. So we have to be absolutely sure of at least that like days or a week when it happens before announcing. We are not sure yet. The removal of the bomb, I think that it puts us at some risks in case some particularly unexpected event happens where the delay is significant, and then we lost the bomb that so far I believe always worked for having everyone prepared for releases and for acting. So once again, I don't think that delaying the bomb delays the merge. I think it simply says that the bomb already started happening. We already missed the previous estimate of around June. This one simply moves it to our current plans of mid-August.
Thanks, Thomas. I don't know who of Andrew or Ben was up first. I guess, yeah, Andrew, you want to go first, and then we'll do Ben?
Yeah, sure. So I think that delaying the bomb is the best option. I don't think that it sends a bad signal. It actually sends a good signal that we are doing the responsible thing, that we want we don't want to rush the merge with code that is not ready. So we kind of moving the bomb to a realistic date, and it does synchronizes our schedule with the bomb. And doing nothing would actually be irresponsible, because then it'll hurt the throughput of the network and I don't see a point, some silly political game. I don't get it. So I would delay the bomb.
Good, thanks. Ben?
Yeah, I disagree with your point, Tim, and others have made about not announcing a date. And I don't understand logic. Let me explain why. What I think we need is a sense of urgency. I'm not really perceiving a sense of urgency about getting this done. There are very real costs associated with not doing the merge. 130,000 tons of carbon dioxide every day. It's nearly 1 million tons a week. Every week we twiddle our thumbs. That's a megaton of carbon dioxide that we're emitting. This is a very serious issue. So where do we get a sense of urgency from? Well, the bomb is a very powerful sense of urgency currently, though that the timing may not be ideal. But I think we owe it to ourselves and we benefit strongly as a distributed community to set some other mechanism by which it gives us a target. So things happen in this community when we have a target to work to. This is my observation. This inculcates a sense of urgency that gets things done. And I've seen it so many times in Ethereum world. So I would propose if we do delay the bomb, we also commit at that point to a time frame for delivering this thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, I think the challenge is if we commit to like a time frame, we can't like set a specific date because there are unknown unknowns. Like if we have an issue show up 2 weeks before, we want to fix the issue rather than have Ethereum go down, even though there's a cost to obviously keep staying on proof of work and not delaying delaying the bomb. So I think it's like, sure, I don't know, my opinion is like, if we do delay the bomb, we should implicitly target some realistic, delay, which I think is what Thomas's EIP was like attempting to do, and we can discuss, whether 500,000 blocks is the right amount. It should be 4, should it be 3, should it be 6? But like, for example, if we delayed the bomb by like 12 months, I agree that would be really bad. I think on the sense of urgency, like it's worth noting, like on the last call and privately to me, like client teams have mentioned that like they do feel pretty stressed and urgent, and that like I think there is a fine balance between having a sense of urgency but just having people be so under pressure that like the quality starts to drop. So I think, yeah, I guess to summarize is, yeah, if we do delay this, I think it should be a realistic delay, like to still maintain this sense of urgency. But I also want to point out, like, there is a point where like too much pressure just pushes teams to like burn out or make worse decisions, and that's also not the situation we want to be in. Yeah, Thomas and TJ, and then I guess if anyone has like final comments, please raise your hand now, and we'll do like a final round and then wrap up. But then, because we're already at time, we are gonna go over a bit.
Hey, sorry.
Oh yeah, sorry. Oh, Bordell, yeah, please, yeah, you haven't gone yet.
Yeah, we cannot fight the raise hand button. Like we kind of discussed a bit just now, and we kind of all agree that delaying the bomb is the way to go. But the calculation that Tomas did is not the way to go, and we should do some calculation that pushes the bomb by roughly 2 months.
Okay.
2 or 3 months.
Thanks.
And we can push out the bomb delay today if we want to, or like schedule the fork as soon as possible.
So on that note, there's like some comments in the chat about that, and I think it's funny because Ensgar, you have the comment about we should make the decision today, but I think it was a year ago. So Ensgar, you made the comment that we should probably not like include EIPs and hard forks on like the first call that they're presented, to give people time to like think through them and think through like the values. So like I would be pretty against like including like setting a hard fork and like making this delay like official right now. I think for sure on the next call we can, and like we can like discuss exactly what the number is, what the right approach, if that's what client teams want to do. Yeah, so that would be my opinion. But yeah, Ansgar, Thomas, and Thomas as well. Y'all have your hands up, but I think Thomas Rush was first, then Thomas, and then Ansgar.
I'll just go real quick. I totally agree and understand everything everyone said in response to what I said. And obviously whatever happens, happens. I think what I'll do is just go back to reporting on what the timing looks like as far as how long the blocks are taking. I do think it's getting a little urgent to make a decision on when to do this fork, no matter what we do. So thanks for listening.
Thomas?
Yeah, hi guys. So I would like to suggest this urgency or even like vote now to announce the fork date on the clients when this would be implemented. I think that we already see like the 17, 18 seconds blocks at the time when the fork would be activated if we announce it for like 3 weeks from now, let's say. I don't think we should be waiting for the next all core devs. And this 500,000 blocks calculation is based on the suggestions from the last call. So it actually is 2.5 months. Just to address what Marius was saying, if there is some miscalculation, please let me know. But I'm just posting here, like we have around, I believe, 6.5 thousand blocks per day, which gives around 190,000 blocks per month, and 500,000 blocks is around 2 months, 18 days, or 2 months, 20 days.
Yeah, I always say 100,000 blocks is 2 weeks, so 500 would be about 2.5 months.
Yeah, sorry, Thomas. We weren't trying to pick on you, but we were just going off by the comment that Ansgar made that it would put us at like 81 days, longer than 81 days. Longer than what. So that the block time that we see right now would only happen in November, and I think that's a bit too much.
So
no, I mean, so I do believe that just blocks happening, that slow blocks as we see now, it's already a problem. I mean, like in 1, 2, 3 weeks, we'll have really degradation of the network. So it's already affecting the mining pools and the users of the network. There'll be base fee going up. So
yeah, I do think we should just review the numbers offline to make sure we're all on the same page. I'm curious to hear, so like from EL client teams, do people think like this is a decision we should take now? Like obviously Nethermind does, Get seems to be on board, but yeah, I just want to make sure. And then if the decision is like we do delay the bomb by some amount that's roughly 2 months, obviously we need to figure out what those things are, like what the exact block number of the delay is async, when we. I don't know that we would want to choose the block height today. Like I think we can probably get that done async as well, just to not like rush it. I don't know. Yeah, I think we can make a decision about like the general, like we do want to delay the bomb by some small amount of months, but I just want to make sure we don't like rush figuring out the exact details on this call and actually take time to like think through how much and when we want it to go off. I don't know. Yeah, I guess, yeah. How do clients?
Yes, we were exactly this. We decided today that want to delay the bomb, and we do async. We do some more calculations, and we decide on what to delay the bomb now as soon as possible, and we should maybe already do the timing for the next fork, for the delay fork. Oh wait, we also need the block numbers for that. So
yeah, so I just don't want us to like come up with like a block number in 30 seconds and it turns out to be wrong.
So,
but
we don't need a block number. We just need a date. Like I think we pick a date, like say in 3 weeks. then we can figure out what the block number is for that later. But we can just choose a date today.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's helpful. I guess I just want okay. Do Besu and Aragon generally agree with that? I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, I think we should delay the bomb, and I think something in a hard fork, something in 3 weeks would be good, and that we can discuss the exact block number offline. But I do think that we should decide to delay it now.
Okay, and Besu.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. To commit to a time and then back into the block height and the delay sounds quite reasonable, especially if we do the off cycle ACD call time for that.
So I wouldn't do an off cycle ACD call. Just to be clear, we have the CL call next week, and like client teams can show EL client teams can show up to that as well if we really need to. But I think if we have the decision now and we agree to the block number and the block number both for the fork and for the delay async, we can just communicate that async. We can just communicate that both async and on the CL call. But I wouldn't have another all core devs a week from now just for this. And then the other part is like when does the delay happen? I heard like 3 weeks. So that means that like, so if we do 3 weeks, just the thing I would want is at least 2 weeks from releases being out to the fork happening. So does that mean that like client teams, assuming that like today or Monday we get like a block number and block height, next week you can have a release that's ready for that, basically. Is that reasonable?
No problem for Nethermind.
Yeah, because I think if we have releases out next week, it means we can announce them early the week after, and ideally.
Yeah, I suggest 29th of June, which is Wednesday. Usually the Wednesday releases were the safest. So the fork, we can, right? Yeah, for the fork, which means that now offline we can confirm the numbers, but everyone can start implementing the IP like configuration to switch it on. Then we can confirm the number offline, and in 2 weeks on the all core devs we can just confirm that everyone is ready, accept, and then the Wednesday after the all core devs on 29th, this would 18.
Yeah, and to be clear, I think we're gonna need confirmation that teams are ready like before that. So my hope would be like we would have a blog post for this by like Thursday or Friday next week with all the client releases. And so, sorry, the one other thing that we need is like some amount of testing for this, which is not huge, but we also need this to happen, obviously. Bordel?
So I think Thomas said we need to have a confirmation in 2 weeks that everybody's ready. I mean, that would be 3 days before the fork. That's definitely way too late. So if we want to fork in 3 weeks, my expectation is that this Wednesday, we have a confirmation from everybody that releases are out. Otherwise, it's just wrecked.
I agree. We need to have the releases out by like this Wednesday actually, yeah, the releases should be out and we should announce them by like the consensus layer call on Thursday, which is 14 UTC on Thursday. Yeah. Yeah, and then
that's fine from Aragon, but we need a name.
Yeah, we'll do the names async as well. Yeah.
Merge is close as the name.
Thomas, you still have your hand up. Did you have a final comment, or is it just up from last time?
So one thing to reiterate for everyone listening in, this does not mean that we will delay the merge. The merge will not be delayed. We are only delaying the difficulty bomb, and it will also take no no like capacity away from working on the merge. This is like a 5-line change, and we can put it out in 10 minutes. And so the this does not impact the merge at all. I guess Coindesk will not listen until this point, so
I'll let people know, Marius, that you said that. Okay, we're already about 15 minutes over. There were like some EIPs that wanted to give updates. I think it makes more sense to move them to the next call so they have proper time. I would encourage people, so there's links in the agenda for EIP 4444 and EIP 5027 if people want to look at them before the next call, because I know, yeah, they basically waited through this and they get the chance. There's also 2 like quick announcements. So next Friday, basically a week from now at like the Alcor Devs time, there's a EIP 4844 call because there's already a couple of teams prototyping it. And so if you're interested in that, the link's in the agenda. And then similarly for EIP 4844, there needs to be a KZG ceremony. And there's a bunch of people working on that, and they're having public calls, I believe, every 2 weeks now. So if people just want to join or watch the recordings, those are linked in the agenda as well. And yeah, just to reiterate, the decision about the bomb is, we're roughly in agreement. We're in agreement to basically include Thomas's EIP, still some bike shedding to do about the exact number to make sure that it's correct. And the activation number, which should probably be about 3 weeks from now, roughly around like June 29th. And then there's some comments on the chat about we need to keep the testnets merging as well. Like, I think that's correct. But obviously, like a bunch of client teams have mentioned, they do need probably more than 2 weeks before they're ready to put out a release for these. So I suspect it's like in the next 2 weeks we get obviously this release for the bomb. That happens in parallel. In parallel, we keep working on Sepolia, and that'll merge sometime probably right after or close to the difficulty bomb being pushed back on mainnet. Any closing? Oh yeah, there's another comment about like continuing shadow forks. We can discuss that on the testing call next week. Yeah.
So one quick thing, we still have shadow fork, mainnet shadow fork 2 running, laying around, and we would like to deprecate it. But before that, we would like to run sync tests, or I would like to run sync tests. So I'm doing the sync tests for Geth, and I think it would be really nice if all the other clients could also run their sync tests on mainnet shadow fork 2. That would probably be interesting.
Okay. Cool. Let's wrap up here. We're already 15 minutes over. Appreciate everyone staying on. And again, apologies to the folks who had EIPs to present. I'll make sure to get to those on the next call. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello.